Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you follow my channel, then you know that my pair of eastern garter snakes, Daryl and Carol, had a litter of babies last spring. And I kept 2 out of 14 of them, and I named them Raven and Sparrow. And this one here is Sparrow. Finding homes for 12 of them wasn't easy. And what I realized was that if I was going to hold back any of them for myself, I wasn't going to be able to choose the pick of the litter. And while I was happy that there were no stillborn babies, there were a few that had some problems, and a few of the babies were born with kinks in their bodies. 2 of the babies, Raven and Sparrow, had the worst kinks, and so those are the 2 that I kept. And when they were just weeks old, the kinks were not that visible, and I really wasn't that concerned about it. But over the last 6 months, the kinks in their bodies have become more pronounced, and I realized that this was going to be something that might impact their lives quite a bit. What looked like one kink in their body eventually grew to about 4 or 5 kinks along the lengths of their entire bodies. Garter snakes can have up to 80 babies in one litter, and they breed for quantity over quality, knowing that some of those babies might not survive to adulthood. And that might seem brutal, but that's just how nature is. And I really didn't even know if these 2 babies would survive. But as time went by, over the last 6 months, they've been eating, pooping, and shedding and growing, and for the most part, they're doing everything that healthy snakes would do. I think some breeders would have a snake in this situation euthanized. And if I thought they were suffering or having a bad quality of life, I would consider that. Really, the only thing that it is affecting is the way they move. And as they move around, the kinks in their bodies cause them to twist and turn in peculiar ways, and their bodies sometimes kind of spiral around. And I don't think that they'll be able to climb very well, if at all. But other than that, they're pretty much just leading normal snake lives. They're about 7 months old now, and even though they're still very small, they've actually quadrupled in size compared to when they were born. You'll have to excuse how they look right now. They both just finished shedding, and coincidentally, they both have a little bit of stuck shed in the same place on the top of their necks. Their tails and eye caps came out clean, though, and I'm sure they'll eventually work off this little bit of retained shed. And you might notice them rubbing their heads on any rough surfaces as they try to work this out. I'm still feeding them a diet of chopped up tilapia fish and earthworms. And just like garter snakes do, they're a little feisty at feeding time and want to fight over their food. And every time I feed them, I have to stand by and break up any squabbling that occurs. But also, just like garter snakes, they've developed a bond between the 2 of them, and they sleep curled up together, and they're very tactile with each other during the day when they're awake. My original plan was to eventually put these two together with their parents when they were big enough, but I think considering everything, I'll probably not do that and just keep them together separately. So far, they've been living in a 20-gallon tank, and although it was bioactive, I set it up in a minimal way for babies. I kept the substrate pretty shallow and just gave them some pieces of bark and leaves to hide under. I also put in two smaller water bowls to make sure they didn't have any problems finding the water. So today I set up something a little more substantial for them. I switched to this 30-gallon tank that's about 6 inches longer, and I made the substrate deeper. I also switched to just one large water bowl, and I gave them some larger pieces of hollow wood to explore. I've spent more time socializing these two snakes than any other snakes I've ever had, and that's been from the moment that they were born. And they have become so accustomed to me that they don't think anything about my presence in their enclosure or being picked up and handled. And maybe because they do have these problems, I've grown to have a very special attachment to these two snakes. I'm always impressed whenever I see a person that's living with a physical disability and seeing that they can do whatever they need to do to rise above it in spite of all the difficulties. I think if I was to ask that person, they would tell me that they don't want people to feel sorry for them and that they would like to be treated just like anybody else. And I don't know what these disabilities are going to mean for the future of these two snakes. I don't know if they're going to get worse or if they're going to get better. I don't know if they're going to maybe have other effects on their health as they grow into adults, or if it might affect their lifespan. But right now, all I can do is try to keep a positive attitude and do everything I can for them. And I'm hoping that if it is anything like the last 6 months, they'll continue to rise above it, and I'll be doing everything I can to help them have the best life possible. Raven and Sparrow still have a lot of growing to do and maybe some uphill battles. So stay tuned because I'm sure there will be more updates on them in the future. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.